We've got some new polling in from ABC News this morning revealing how Americans feel about Biden and feel about Trump with regards to the protest movements in particular. Let's go ahead and throw that data up on the screen. Overwhelmingly, and this is consistent with other polls that we've seen, Americans trust Biden a lot more than Trump on everything from handling the protests, of course, the response to COVID. Those numbers are pretty overwhelming, reducing violence, and also keeping us safe. So the Trump campaign has made this big bet on basically like messaging around safety and security focused at suburban voters. And the polling just doesn't show that this is a message that is going to work for people because ultimately they feel like Trump is more likely to add to the chaos rather than to tamp tensions down.
I think that's right. And I think that once the issue I mainly have is that you can chip into Biden, but you have to chip into him in the right places, which is that where would people be willing to go against Biden? Most of all, people have a generally favorable view of Joe Biden. They're like, I like the guy.
Yeah.
So you have to make it to be like, look, you may like the guy, but he was complicit in the decisions that made your life the way it is right now. He was complicit in the decision to ship your jobs overseas. He was complicit in the decisions in order to send your sons to Iraq. He was complicit in bankrupting the country through Afghanistan and more. He would empower the many people who would keep you down in terms of the neoliberal trade consensus. That is the type of messaging where somebody could say, oh, wait, like I may like Joe, but if he's going to do these things, then and here's the other thing. There's a lot more truth to back it up than Joe Biden is a radical left, socialist, all that, right? Because, like I've said before, I think many of his staffers are very like woke neoliberal identitarian people, but that's not really the argument that you hear from the Trump campaign. And I've always had a problem with process critiques of Joe Biden may not be crazy, but the people who work for him are crazy. Well, most Americans just don't think that way. Like I said, most Americans can't name the Secretary of the Treasury. They can't name even, Peter Navarro. They don't know who Peter Navarro is.
And that's not a slam on them. They're living their lives.
Please, you don't need to know that. It's our job to be like, the fact that he works there, as a broader public policy public. But that is not something that as a presidential campaign that you can prosecute your staff on and be like, well, his deputy secretary of state is going to be crazy. I mean, people are just not going to buy that.
The interesting thing is, first of all, I would actually dispute. A lot of his staffers are like longtime Democratic operatives.
On econ.
Who basically, they're like corporate aligned. They're just sort of standard issue. They don't particularly have an ideology to speak of. They're just like go along with whatever candidate is going to preserve that status quo. But it's really interesting in this polling because it basically, Americans felt like Trump would actually make things worse in terms of the violence and the protests and the tensions of the country. It's not like they thought Joe Biden would make things better. He was just like a neutral.
Yeah.
Like it's at least he's not going to make things worse. Like that's where the bar is at this point. And I guess I have a little bit of sympathy for the Trump campaign, frankly, because I just think that given President Trump does have certain strengths, right? He has this strength of like saying things you're really not supposed to say, of making people lose their minds, right? Upending the apple cart, like making people sort of freak out. All the like fancy people in this town sort of freak out. And that is an affirmative strength in a lot of times. But right now when people are like, I just want someone who's calm, I want someone who's competent.
Yes.
I want somebody who's going to make me feel like I have some predictability and safety in my life. That landscape is a particularly challenging one for him. I mean, to imagine him handling that well, you basically have to imagine him being a different person than he is, right? We can sit here and say, look, if you just took coronavirus seriously and like focused on it and had a competent response, then you'd be in a lot better position. Because as much as we're talking about the unrest in the streets, Americans overwhelmingly still like coronavirus is the thing. He's just not a guy who's capable of pulling that off, and he's never gonna be. That's the reality
right.
here.
And then there's another issue here, which I thought was very insightful from CNN, where Harry Enton, he dug into the honesty gap. And one of the things that was very key in 2016 is that people viewed Trump and Clinton as dishonest, equally dishonest, actually.
Right.
And in some cases, Clinton more dishonest. That was one of the things that you just always kind of knew about her. Well, this time around, Americans actually see it much more as Biden being more of an honest actor. So that's why the name Crooked Hillary struck such a chord. Because it was like, I remember he would say it sometimes on the trail. He'd be like, she just cannot tell the truth. And everyone would nod. And everyone kind of agreed with that. On Biden, I think there's a general sense where you feel he feels that he's telling the truth, if that makes sense.
Yes.
It feels that he's telling the truth. Now, he's lied many times, about getting arrested from Nelson Mandela, Iraq, and so much more. But this is where just being a better politician actually comes in handy, which is if you lie better, affectually and politically, that is how it comes across. So I think that is something definitely working against Trump. And that's why they're always like Sleepy Joe or Joe doesn't know what he's doing, or one of these things, because they're trying to lean hard into this process critique. And again, I just do not think process stuff lands with the American people. You can go after Biden for his record already. And then even when we have the Trump campaign on here, they talk about the crime bill from '94, right? That is not something that is congruous with the message of law and order. Like, you have to choose. Like, he either locked up a lot of people or like law and order. It's like, which one? So President Trump lets criminals out of prison and he's going to throw them in prison? Like, which one does that make sense?
That was funny when we had them on this week, and I was like, so wait, he was too tough on crime before, but now he's like lawless Antifa guy? Like,
don't get me started about
what direction are we going?
Criminal justice thing with Trump. But
the honesty thing, though, I think is actually really interesting and really insightful, and also goes to this point of like part of Biden's strength. And I do think that he is underestimated often throughout his political. He was underestimated by Barack Obama, who chose Hillary Clinton over him.
Yes.
And I think Biden would have had a much better chance of beating Trump last time around than Hillary ultimately did. But also, I think it shows too this sense of Trump has not figured out how to run against him. He hasn't figured out what he wants to run on. The RNC was all over the place. And the fact that he doesn't have a nickname locked in for Joe, he had Sleepy Joe. Now that people are like, actually being able to go back to sleep sounds freaking amazing. Yeah. Like, I would love to be able to like sleep soundly at night. And Joe is kind of like that force. It doesn't land, and so I don't hear him using that as much. They've tried like Basement Biden and some other things, but the fact that he doesn't even have like a solid nickname locked in for Joe Biden kind of tells you the state of their campaign.
Yeah, I think that's right.
All right, well, I have more Rising for you after this.